Hey guys, good morning. Mark Beauclair here, and today I have the pleasure of bringing you Job chapter 26. And before we get started, I want to talk to you about Job chapter 25 and give you guys a rundown of what happened. So we had Bildad, who just gave his speech restating what the other two friends had just previously said, which opposed Job's claim of his innocence and his purity. So now Job gives his response in chapter 26. So let's start in verse 1 through 4. But Job answered and said, how have you helped him who is without power? How have you saved the arm that has no strength? How have you counseled one who has no wisdom? And how have you declared sound advice to many? To whom have you uttered words, and whose spirit came from you? So what Job is saying is, hey, you gave all of this talk. You were just talking, but you haven't helped my situation. You're giving counsel, but you're not giving me comfort. So his friends were more concerned about winning the argument and proving that they were right and proving that Job was wrong. And also they wanted him to admit that they were right. So what we see is their counsel was refused. And how many times do we do that? How many times do we want to win the battle, but we end up losing the war because people don't want to hear it? They turn away from us, or either they're damaged by it. So we see an interesting phrase in verse 3, which says, how have you declared sound advice to many? To whom have you uttered words? So what he's saying is, how many other people have you talked to like this? How many other people have you damaged? And next he talks about whose spirit came from you. We already know that spirit, Eliphaz said that a mysterious spirit gave him that message earlier on in Job. And now we see Bildad is regurgitating pretty much what they said. So I've always been of the mindset, and I always learned when I was younger, if you don't have anything that's good to say, don't say anything at all, because it doesn't help people. And also, if you're going to use Bible verses to just give people some kind of advice, but it's not biblical, it's manipulative, you don't need to say anything at all. So that's what we see by this. Now, verse 5 through 14, I'm not going to read it, but I encourage you to read it on your own time. What it's talking about is Job. He's given his response to Bildad's argument in chapter 25, which he's saying, hey, Job, I don't think that you really know God like you think you know God. And Job is saying, I beg to differ. So he gives him a scientific lesson. And we see he says, hey, you started and you talked about the heavens. I'm going to talk about below and above, from the depths and to heaven. So now the remarkable thing about this is one of the earliest books of the Bible that we know of. Now, think about that. Job didn't have all of the technology that we have. He didn't have all of the cameras, the high-tech cameras, the meteorologists, and also he didn't have a telescope to see all of this stuff in heaven, but he knew all of this stuff. Job knew God, even though it didn't seem like he did now. And we see he understood the clouds, that they were dense and that they held a whole lot of water. When it rained, that God held them up until that point that he wanted the water to fall down. And also he understood the curve of the earth. How could he know that? It's remarkable. And also he understood the energy that was stored up in storms. We see with lightning, it produces kilowatts of energy. How would he know that, right? But his point was clear. He was expressing how great and how powerful God was. He knew that God knows everything. God sees everything. God controls everything. And also that he reveals himself in nature. As Romans chapter 1 verse 20 says, for since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so they are without excuse. Now, think about this, about atheists. How can you see all that God did in creation and then you say that there is no God? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We can look at the world around us and we consider the fact that God controls it all. That should give us an awe. That should give us wonder and humility about it, to see that nothing is by chance. God does everything and he controls everything. So in verse 14, we see Job finishes it out with saying, in light of all that I know and all that I understand, I know enough to know that I don't understand a whole lot when it comes to God. And we see the fact that we have a God who we couldn't possibly understand just a fraction of his power, his ways, and all of that. But he chose to make himself known to us through this word and through his son coming down. And also that he cares about us and he controls everything. It's just amazing. It is amazing just to think about, to process, to take through our minds and stuff. And that should be an encouragement to everybody today. So I thank you guys for joining, and I pray that you have an awesome rest of the day.